The Roman heat spared no one. When the thermometer, if it had existed, would have climbed above 50 degrees, the sands of Syria and Egypt became not just a road, but an enemy. Warriors, forged in armor, carried up to 40 kilograms of equipment, and every breath inhaled fire. What did a soldier drink to survive in the hell of the desert? Why did thousands survive where even camels succumbed to thirst? And what drink, simple, almost pauper-like, became the salvation of entire legions? The answer to this question will change your perception of the Roman army. Polybius wrote that Roman campaigns through Syria and Judea were accompanied by exhausting heat and scarce water sources. Legionaries, according to him, marched not only against the enemy but also against nature itself. Their lives depended on a flask, not a sword. They did not drink pure water. The desert water could not be trusted, stagnant, murky, contaminated. To tame it, the Romans mixed it with sour wine, obtaining a drink called posca, from the Latin posca. This was not a luxury, it was a survival strategy. Posca, a drink made from sour wine, water, and sometimes herbs, became as vital an element of supply as bread and salt. Modern archaeologists have found remnants of amphorae with a characteristic sediment of wine vinegar at legionary encampments in Egypt and the Middle East. These traces are silent witnesses to the drink that saved thousands. Imagine a formation of legionaries in armor under the scorching sun. Sweat runs into their eyes, lips crack. One sip of posca, sour, sharp, burning, felt like lightning in the body. It did not quench thirst instantly, but it prevented the brain from breaking down from the heat. This taste of acidity, familiar to every soldier, became the taste of endurance itself. Survival tactics in Rome were never limited to the sword. Even the drink was part of the discipline. Posca not only protected against thirst, it prevented infections when doctors were a rarity. Microbes did not survive in the acid, and warriors, unaware of microbes, simply said, "Posca cleanses from within." The centurion, commander of 100 legionaries, oversaw not only the formation, but also ensured that everyone drank on time. Drinking in the Roman formation was a ritual, almost a military order. A legionary who did not adhere to the norm risked not receiving commendation, for a weakened soldier was a threat to the entire line. But was this sour drink truly a salvation, or merely a symbol of the poverty of an army that lacked wine? Historians still debate this. Some see posca as a remedy against dehydration, others as a forced substitute when wine was too expensive. And yet archaeological findings confirm it was posca that accompanied the legions from Gaul to Syria. Traces of vinegar were even found on fragments of vessels in the forts of the limes, the northern frontiers of the empire. The same scent of acid, from the cold swamps of Britannia to the scorching sands of Palestine. Through this taste of burning vinegar, Romans marched along thousands of kilometers of roads. They did not know the word electrolytes, but they knew that after a sip of posca, the body came alive, like iron cooled in water. In this secret lies one of the reasons why Rome survived where other empires perished. But in this story, there is another, almost forgotten detail: how posca transformed from a pauper's drink into an official army supply standard. And it is this transition that will show how ingenious the Roman logistics were, where every drop had a price. When legionaries prepared for a long march, their readiness was measured not by wine and bread, but by the amount of posca in reserve. Preparation for crossing the desert began not with formation, but with checking water skins. In the warehouses, which smelled of sour wine and resin, centurions personally inspected the amphorae. Each of them cost less than wine, but was more valuable than gold in the hour of heat. A legionary on campaign carried about 40 kilograms, armor, shield, sword, throwing javelins, rations, and a flask with the drink. This weight was called sarcina, the marching burden. But if a sword broke, it could be replaced. If posca ran out, an entire unit perished. Posca was stored in leather water skins covered with wax or fat so that they would not let air through. Legionaries filled them at each stop, mixing water from the nearest source with sour wine, brought in amphorae from Italy or Egypt. The vinegar was diluted in a ratio of 1:3 or 1:4, so the drink was acidic enough not to spoil, but did not cause a burn. Modern biochemists confirm, at such acidity, intestinal bacteria do not survive in the water, which could destroy an army faster than an enemy. But Posca was not just an antiseptic. It served as a unique ancient energy drink. In the acidic liquid, salt dissolved, remaining after sweat, and a little sugar from the wine residue. It was this that sustained the soldiers during the march. Modern scientists compare its effect to solutions given to athletes when exhausted. Then, no one spoke of electrolytes, but the Romans felt the body came alive after Posca. Tacitus wrote that Augustus's warriors did not fear the sun as long as amphorae with sour wine were available. Historians Goldsworthy and Sayer note, Rome was the first in history to create a liquid supply system that took human physiology into account. And now, imagine the moment of deployment. The column stretches for kilometers. The sun rises. The air hums with heat. Warriors march in helmets and cuirasses, which heat up like ovens. Every step echoes in their heels. Breathing becomes viscous. At the halt, the centurion gives a short command, "Bibite," drink. Soldiers raise their water skins. A sip. The acid burns the tongue, but then a strange feeling of vigor comes. Posca restores their minds, like a cold shower restores consciousness to a person fainting. This acid became part of Roman discipline. Every warrior had to drink not when he wanted, but when the commander ordered, and not as much as he wanted, but according to the norm. Violation was punished. In an army where order was valued above life, even a sip of water was an act of obedience. The term contubernium meant tent brotherhood, 8 people who lived and fought together. They shared not only food and shelter, but also Posca. 1 water skin for everyone. If someone drank too much, they could be punished by their comrades, for in the desert, water is a collective weapon. In Roman camps, especially on the eastern borders, there were entire wine stores where sour wine was diluted and prepared for distribution. Archaeologists found amphorae with traces of acetic acid at a site in Dura Europos, on the bank of the Euphrates, proof that Posca was produced en masse. It was brewed in cauldrons, cooled, and poured into water skins to be issued the next day. This logistics was as important as the delivery of weapons. Without Posca, the army could reach the enemy already half dead. And it was this drink that became the foundation of Roman resilience in conditions where no other army survived. But in this drink lay another meaning, a symbol of the distinction between a soldier and an officer. Officers, tribunes, and legates drank wine. Rank-and-file soldiers, Posca. The taste of the drink was a reminder of the boundary between authority and subordination. When a legionary raised the water skin to his lips, he drank not only against thirst, he drank his place in the system. Nevertheless, Posca became a drink of pride. Caesar, according to Plutarch, sometimes drank it with his soldiers to show that he was one of them. This gesture caused delight in the ranks. An emperor partaking of a pauper's drink became closer to the common people. Thus, sour wine transformed into a symbol of army unity, into the liquid that bound the legions more strongly than an oath. With every campaign, with every desert where caravans perished while the Romans pressed on, Posca became part of their code. And perhaps it was precisely it, not the sword, that allowed the legions to reach the farthest limits of the world, where roads ended and eternal heat began. But once this drink played a role that no one expected, when heat and thirst met in a deadly struggle, and Posca decided who would survive and who would remain in the sand. Summer, 66th year of our era. The Judean desert pulsed with heat as if the earth itself was preparing to explode. Roman legions under the command of Vespasian moved towards Jerusalem, leaving behind a swath of scorched dust. Hundreds of kilometers of march, rare sources, the sun melting helmets, and the smell of vinegar which became the smell of life for the soldiers. Here, amidst the stones and heat, Pascha transformed not just into a drink, but into a weapon against death itself. The historian Josephus wrote that the Romans marched through a land without water, where even animals perished from thirst. He noted that their endurance was a miracle because they drank sour wine, which kept the body vigorous and the mind clear. To the modern ear, this sounds almost like a metaphor, but archaeology confirms his words. At legionary encampments in Judea, amphorae were found with remnants of acid and traces of fermented resins, evidence of mass Pascha preparation. Soldiers carried flasks wrapped in cloth so that moisture would evaporate and cool the contents. One sip of this sour drink could separate life from death. And when the body no longer obeyed, when legs refused to walk, Pascha restored strength, as if igniting a new fire in the veins. But Pascha also had another effect. It protected against sunstrokes. Modern researchers calculated that at high temperatures, wine diluted with water reduced the risk of heat collapse by almost half. Romans did not know these terms, but they knew the result. Warriors who drank Pascha according to the norm endured the march longer than those who drank pure water. At that time, a special concept existed in the army: rationes aquarum, water norms. This was a kind of survival protocol. The centurion determined the amount of liquid for the day based on temperature and terrain. Water was distributed among units, and Pascha was prepared centrally. Rome did not trust nature. It subjected it to its system. Tacitus wrote that the legions stationed in Syria were trained to drink on signal so as not to consume their supply haphazardly. Even thirst obeyed Roman discipline. This was a paradox: absolute power over the body through submission to a common rhythm. When a unit reached an oasis, water was not perceived as a gift, but as a resource. It was immediately diluted with wine vinegar, measured by amphorae, and sent for distribution. This process was called acetare, to make vinegary. The word has been preserved in Latin texts as a synonym for purification. The smell of vinegar became an integral part of campaigns. It was sensed even at night when legionaries rested in their tents. It permeated the skin, the fabric, the armor. Some historians believe that it was this smell that helped distinguish a Roman camp from a barbarian one, by the sour note that hung over the camp. Veterans' recollections, carved on gravestones, sometimes mentioned wine in the name of life. This poetic turn of phrase, according to researchers, pointed to Pascha, for no other drink was so closely linked to the very concept of survival. But Pascha saved not only bodies, it saved order. When warriors lost strength, discipline collapsed. In the desert, anarchy begins with thirst, and thirst with the first empty flask. A legion that maintained its supplies and drinking regimen could withstand any ordeal. He who drank without measure perished first. Polybius wrote that the Romans conquered not by numbers, but by their habit of enduring hardships. And Pascha became the most tangible form of this habit. It embodied the idea of moderation, a sip, but no more. Everyone knew, if the body gave in, the mind would perish. But in the Judean campaign, Pascha acquired new meaning. When the heat reached its peak and springs dried up, the Romans began adding local herbs to the drink: wormwood, myrrh, coriander. These plants gave the taste bitterness, but helped the body combat nausea and thirst. Thus, a special variant was born: Pascha orientalis, Eastern Pascha. Its traces have also been discovered by archaeologists. A sedimentary substance with wormwood essential oils was found in amphorae from Masada. This recipe quickly spread among the troops. Soldiers said that Eastern Pascha burns but revitalizes. It became a symbol of campaigns in the East, the drink of those who marched through hell. And it was during these years that Pascha transformed from a utilitarian drink into a legend. It was written about in letters home, mentioned in chronicles, and warriors who returned to Italy continued to drink it out of habit. But once, on a march through the Sinai, something happened that transformed Pascha from a means of survival into a symbol of the empire's very destiny. When water ran out and sour wine became the last liquid in the camp, the Romans had to make a choice between loyalty to command and the thirst for life. Sinai, 71st year of our era. Stones sharp as a blade, air like glass, and the sun cutting the sky into pieces. Vespasian directed the legion through this dead landscape to link up with the garrison in Alexandria. It was a march through emptiness, where even the wind seemed an enemy. And it was here that Pascha underwent a trial that no other Roman invention would have withstood. Livy wrote that the Romans marched when even the sand could not move. But behind these words lay a terrible reality. The heat reached 60 degrees, armor scorched shoulders, flasks emptied faster than they could be refilled. One legionary carried about 40 kilograms on himself, but after a few hours it seemed that the weight had tripled. Sweat did not evaporate, it simply vanished, as if the body was drying out from within. Under these conditions, even a sip of water turned into an act of will. Pascha became the last barrier between order and chaos. Centurions, as iron as the swords themselves, marched along the column, ensuring that no one drank before the signal. Punishment awaited those who violated this, not for greed, but for threatening collective survival. The term disciplina militaris denoted the iron order that was the heart of the Roman army. But in the Sinai, it acquired a literal meaning: discipline saved from death. As the sun dipped towards the horizon, legionaries gathered in a circle. On the ground stood water skins with the last portion of Pascha. A sour smell filled the camp, mingling with dust and sweat. Each received a sip, no more. One sip, one life. This sour drink, according to Tacitus, kept the warrior on his feet when his mind already wanted to give up. Modern research confirms vinegar in combination with salts helps maintain water balance during significant fluid loss. The Romans did not know formulas, but they knew the result. And this knowledge was worth thousands of saved lives to the empire. When strength abandoned people, Pascha transformed into a ritual. They did not just drink it, they partook of it as a vow. Warriors raised their water skins to the sun and uttered a short phrase, pro vita, for life. This was not a drunken feast, but a somber, almost sacred act. The taste of acid reminded them that life was not sweet, but strong. Some modern historians, such as Adrian Goldsworthy, believed that it was Pascha that allowed the Romans to develop a unique psychology of endurance. An army where every sip obeyed command formed not just fighters, it created machines capable of living by the empire's rhythm. On that day in the Sinai, a storm raised sand to the heavens, visibility disappeared, caravans were lost, and it seemed that the entire army was buried beneath the desert. No water remained. But in Vespasian's camp, amphorae with sour wine remained. It was diluted with dew collected from the tent fabric and distributed to the warriors. This moment entered the chronicles. They drank life from the air. Pascha mixed with dew saved hundreds of soldiers, but most importantly, it preserved the formation. Not a single legionary left the column. Rome survived not by miracle, but by calculation. When the caravan finally reached the oasis, half the unit was on the verge of losing consciousness, but the formation remained steady. After this campaign, Pascha officially entered military supply regulations. Emperor Titus, Vespasian's son, approved it as a mandatory part of rations. In documents of that time, the record is found. Acetum militare, military vinegar. This was not a drink for the poor, but a strategic resource, supplied on par with bread and salt. Archaeologists find amphorae stamped with acetum in camps throughout the East. Israeli Masada, Egyptian Koptos, Syrian Palmyra. These findings confirm that Pasca was produced centrally as a weapon of supply. It was transported along with grain and salt, protected by guards, and distributed according to a strict schedule. And yet, not only physical strength was hidden in this drink, Pasca changed the very culture of the army. Warriors began to perceive the sour taste as a sign of belonging. Wine was for citizens, Pasca for soldiers. This distinction gave rise to a special form of pride, the pride of survivors. Plutarch wrote that a legionary, returning home, first demanded a sip of sour wine to remember the road. This aftertaste linked them to the past, to comrades, to the desert. The taste of survival became the taste of memory. But this story also had a darker shade. When the empire began to crack at the seams, Pasca, once a symbol of strength, became a symbol of need. The empire, once holding the world, itself became like its drink, diluted, sour, but still alive. And yet, until the end of Rome, Pasca remained in the army. Even in its final years, when legions retreated from the Germanic rivers, soldiers still carried a water skin with vinegar, because they knew, as long as there is Pasca, there is order, and as long as there is order, Rome lives. But to understand why this sour drink outlived even the fall of the empire, one must see how it became not just a means of survival, but a part of the very Roman spirit, a symbol of resilience, discipline, and eternal submission of mind over body. After Sinai, Pasca ceased to be merely a military norm. It became part of the Roman identity. It was drunk in the garrisons of Britannia, in the camps of Dacia, on the watchtowers along the Rhine. There, where the wind tore skin from faces and the sky seemed leaden, legionaries raised their water skins and drank the same sour drink as their brothers in the East. Thousands of kilometers separated them, but one taste united them, the taste of endurance. Tacitus noted that Pasca kept soldiers from drunkenness and debauchery, for unlike wine, it did not cloud the mind, but sobered it. This drink became an instrument of moral discipline. In it, there was no joy, only necessity. Every sip reminded one that they were part of a mechanism where weakness was unacceptable. In the fortress of Vindolanda, in northern Britannia, archaeologists found letters from Roman soldiers. One of them mentions a request to send acetum and bread. Two simple things, but they defined a legionary's life. Acid for the body, bread for the spirit. In the cold, where rain turned the earth into a swamp, Pasca warmed not with heat, but with the strength of habit. The term frumentum denoted the general ration of a legionary: grain, oil, salt, and Pasca. This supply system became an example of Roman genius. Every part of the empire could supply the army without interruption. If grain did not arrive, soldiers baked barley cakes. If there was no wine, they used vinegar from local fruits. But Pasca remained an unchanging formula: acid and water. It became a measure of constancy. Emperor Domitian, according to Suetonius, once ordered wine for officers to be replaced with Pasca during a siege, so that there would be no difference between commander and soldier. This decision caused indignation in the Senate, but earned respect on the battlefield. Even the elite felt what the army lived by: the bitterness of acid, which makes the body stronger than steel. The sensory experience of this drink was unique. It burned the lips, left a metallic taste on the tongue, made the stomach clench. But after a few minutes, the body seemed to reawaken. Fatigue vanished, as if dissolving in the blood along with the acid. In this feeling there was something almost religious, purification through suffering. And indeed, Pasca gradually moved beyond the military world. It began to be drunk by the poor, artisans, even philosophers. Seneca wrote that, "The mind should be like a legionary's body, simple, moderate, and purified by sour wine. Thus, the army's drink became a symbol of stoicism. Over time, Pasca also permeated the daily life of cities. In Rome, it was sold near the baths and in markets, where it smelled of resin and bread. Street vendors were called Pascarii. Their voices echoed near the forums. Drink and cool down. People drank not for pleasure, but for clarity. This drink became an antidote against excess, a reminder that strength is born from discipline. But in the army, Pasca remained primarily a ritual of survival. Warriors washed themselves with it before battle, believing that the acid cleansed fear. After battles, wounds were treated with it. Vinegar disinfected the skin. Even shields were sometimes rubbed with Pasca so that the wood would not crack from the sun. All this made the drink a universal ally for a person living on the edge. During Trajan's campaigns in the east, soldiers marched through Mesopotamia, where the heat reached 50 degrees. Written sources mention that each warrior received 3 cups of Pasca per day. This was a norm, proven over centuries. In such conditions, wine quickly spoiled, while Pasca remained suitable for weeks. Its acidity was stronger than time. Sometimes archaeologists find sediment of tartar and salt at the bottom of ancient vessels. These findings are chemical autographs of survival. Even after 2,000 years, one can sense the smell of acid that the army conquering the world breathed. Soldiers' letters found in Egypt indicate that Pasca was associated with home. One legionary wrote, "When I drink sour wine, I feel like my brothers are nearby." For them, this drink was not just a liquid, it was a memory of formation, of order, of loyalty. Thus, Pasca transformed into a cultural code of the empire. The acid in the waterskin became a metaphor for Rome itself. Strong, severe, but surviving against all odds. While other empires feasted, the Romans endured, and in this endurance lay their strength. But time is relentless. The empire, built on discipline, began to lose its rhythm, and when the legions faltered, when order dissolved into disorder, Pasca became the last reminder of what made Rome great. The taste of acid remained, even when the eagles on the standards disappeared. And it is this taste, strange and bitter, that will lead us to the empire's final years, when Pasca, the soldier's drink, became a symbol of its fall and memory. By the 4th century CE, Rome was no longer what it had been in the Sinai. The army was stretched thin, legions were filled with barbarians, and discipline weakened. But Pasca remained, the last thread connecting soldiers to the past. It was still brewed in camp kitchens, mixing vinegar with murky water from swamps or rivers. It no longer saved the empire, but it saved individuals. In the chronicles of Ammianus Marcellinus, there is a short, almost unnoticed entry. Soldiers on the Rhine drank sour wine and remembered old times. This is not just a mundane detail. It is the nostalgia of a civilization. The taste which once meant victory became the taste of survival amidst ruins. When Rome lost cities, gold, roads, Pasca remained what could not be taken away. It could be made from anything, from grape juice, from sour apples, even from fermented berries. And in every sip lived the memory of order. Old legionaries taught the young not prayers but recipes. "Do not fear the acid," they said. "Fear the emptiness." And these words became the last philosophy of the empire. Pasca ceased to be merely a drink. It became a way of thinking, harsh, economical, but unyielding. Even after the fall of Western Rome, when barbarians entered Italy, Pasca did not disappear. It was drunk in Byzantine garrisons then, by monks, then by peasants. In the Middle Ages, it transformed into a vinegary drink of the poor, vin aigre, sour wine, hence the French vinaigre, a direct descendant of the Latin vinum acer. And if one looks closely, this drink outlived everyone. It passed from legions into kitchens, from a weapon into daily life. In every drop, a trace of Roman order, dissolved in time. Thus, the sour taste of Pascha became the taste of eternity. Not of victory, not of glory, but of resilience, that sole quality without which no empire lives long.